Hey guys, welcome to another Symbolic Studies live stream. I'm really excited for this one. I've been working on this presentation for the last couple of weeks, and I just have so much to say about what we're about to get into. And I have a lot of slides. I kind of maxed out the PDF limit for StreamYard once again. But we have a lot of cool imagery to look at, and there are just so many things that I've been wanting to get off my chest regarding what I refer to as Illuminati symbolism. And I guess before we get into anything, I wanted to mention a couple of things regarding my relationship to this material. And so most of you guys probably already know, but in case you're new to the channel or this is your first live stream or something, um, I feel like I have a little bit of a different background with symbolism in general. And that's because of a few things, really. Um, the first main thing is that I've been an artist for like my whole entire life. And so I've been a graphic designer for over 20 years now, which I can't even believe that. It's crazy to think about that. But I've been a graphic designer for over 20 years. And so I have been kind of in Photoshop messing around with all sorts of different types of icons and images and shapes and things like that for a good long while. And so for me to be interested in symbolism on a deeper level made a ton of sense just over the years. And so I remember I bought my first symbolic reference book. I think probably around 2006 or so, maybe 2007. And then ever since then, I just started collecting symbolic dictionaries and symbolic reference books. And I started getting familiar with some of the more well known symbologists and things like that out there. And so now I have a pretty good sized collection of symbolic reference material that I use all the time. And so, as an example, I have a number of books where I can just dive into and look up the meaning of eye, or pyramid or anything really. And so, because I have so much cross reference material, I've just found that to be really, really valuable. And most people don't take the time to do that. And understandably so, because it's kind of like this nerdy sort of thing. You have to be really, really interested in that topic to do that. And so I feel like I have a almost like a symbologist background, basically. And so there are things that I pull from that material that I rarely hear be discussed kind of anywhere else. And so, as an example, I've been going on about polar symbolism and the world axis and things like that. And I think it kind of throws some people off potentially because they're not aware that there is a whole symbolic tradition that incorporates some of this material. And so I feel like I've been given a unique perspective because of my design background and also because of my symbolism background, that when I decode things, it tends to come from a different place than a lot of other people. And so, as I'm just living life and doing my thing, when I see movies or I see ad campaigns or I see any kind of artwork out in the wild, I tend to have a unique perspective on what I'm seeing, but it's because I'm kind of falling back on the 2 decades of design that I've done, and then I'm also falling back on a lot of the material that I have in my library that says that, when you're dealing with the wheel, as an example, you're talking about the turning of the cosmos, of the heavens. So that's one thing I just wanted to put out there. The other thing I wanted to say is that when it comes to what I'm calling Illuminati symbolism, the Illuminati rabbit hole is something that I spent a bit of time in years ago, but I haven't really occupied my time looking into it these days. Although I see a lot of people talking about it, and I think it's interesting that there's always like a new generation coming across this material. And so I think that there's a lot of people who kind of want to know what some of this stuff is all about. Always there's always going to be new people waking up to some of this information. And so as I've seen people explain some of the symbolism that tends to get associated with secret societies and the Illuminati and everything. When I see what people say about it, I tend to just have these days a different opinion about what we're actually seeing. And so I feel like over the last like 6 months or something, I've seen people online talk about some of this symbolism, and I've just been itching to get some of those ideas of what I think it means off my chest, because I think it makes a lot of sense based on a lot of the research that I've done over the last few years. And so that's what I'm here to do, is get some of these ideas off my chest, see what you guys think about it, and hopefully connect some dots for you, because I have not heard people explain some of this symbolism through this lens, through this perspective. And so here I am, and I'm stoked to talk about it. And so we should get to it. I'm not going to address the chat during the presentation, but I will check at the very end. And it's pretty traditional for me to cover up the view count here because I always get distracted. It's like going up, and then I don't know, it just totally throws me off, or it goes down and then that throws me off too. So I'm just going to cover it up because in some ways it doesn't even really matter. Also, I'm not on YouTube right now. I'm just on StreamYard, but I believe super chats are now enabled. So there is that. If you like what you're seeing, if you want to support the channel, that's one great way of doing it. Also, Patreon is another awesome way. So patreon.com/symbolicstudies. Yeah, with all of that said, let's get to it. There is a lot to go over. So let's not waste any more time. And here we go. All right, Illuminati symbolism. So also, just to be as open as possible with everything, I am analyzing a very specific set of symbols. This is not a history of the Illuminati or secret societies. There's a lot to be said about all of that stuff, and I respect the researchers who know a lot about, the Bavarian Illuminati and things like that. This, for the most part, is me decoding, I would say, probably 2 or 3 of the most common symbols that are associated with the Illuminati, like the all-seeing eye, which you can see right here, which is obviously, on the $1 bill and everything else. So I figured I would just start there with everything. And so I made that the main graphic for this presentation. Right. So here we are. This is the $1 bill. And so financial, monetary symbolism, the magical aspect of our currency, and just kind of what's going on with all of that Babylonian money magic, whatever you want to call it. That's a whole sort of thing in and of itself. And there are so many tangents we can go on with its relationship to water, as an example, right? Currency. Probably a lot of you guys are aware of that. There's a lot of Hermetic symbolism that we could get into, Mercurial symbolism that we can get into, Egyptian symbolism that we can get into. This thing is absolutely loaded. There is so much going on here. But for the sake of this presentation, we're going to really hone in on a few very specific things. Notably, the pyramid with the capstone, the all-seeing eye, and the New World Order, and what that's all about, and what it's actually alluding to, according to my research. And so I just wanted to put this out there. This is usually the context in which you see that pyramid with the all-seeing eye. I'm sure you guys are very, very familiar with this by now. And here it is, just a closer version of what's going on here, right? And I'm going to be discussing too what is said above and what is said below, right? And so we will get around to that for sure. And here is what the all-seeing eye, or the eye of providence, looks like in other contexts. And so if you just Google it, you're going to see so many different examples of this artwork. The one eye within the triangle. And oftentimes there are rays emanating from this triangle. And so this is implying so many different things. But, our eye, uh, esoterically, it's interesting. We tend to think of our eye as only receiving information, but in actuality, it's also projecting information as well. And so anything that is shaped like a yoni is both projective and receptive. So that's one thing to understand just about eye symbolism in general, is that there's a projectivity sort of thing going on there, without a doubt, as well as a receptive sort of nature. But obviously with rays, generally, we tend to think about the projective element of everything. And when it comes to the Illuminati, celebrity culture is completely baked into a lot of this symbolism. And so there are countless celebrities that have done the all-seeing eye hand gesture, right, in public. If you just Google it, there's just like hundreds and hundreds of images of different celebrities doing this all over the place, right? And so this has become a meme, and so this has become a meme. It's part of pop culture now. Most people have some understanding of what Illuminati means, or what secret societies are and everything else. And so over the decades, this kind of symbolism has become really popular, essentially. And so all of you guys are familiar with this, right? And even people who aren't interested in alternative information or symbolism, they at least have some sort of clue about all of this stuff now, because this has been put in our faces for a very long time. And so, what is it all, alluding to? What is it referencing? And I'm going to try and explain from my perspective what some of this is all about. There's also the whole entire thing about either covering up one eye, showing one eye, or emphasizing one eye with the AOK hand gesture. Not going to get into even honestly some of the ritualistic aspects of all this stuff, but I'm really honing in on what does the one eye symbolism represent, right? And so this is just a collage that I pulled from Google or something like that. And so there are many, many examples of this, once again, of celebrities or politicians or whatever, people doing things with one eye and kind of gesturing to some of this symbolism. It even comes in the form of black eyes, too, right? And so one eye is black, and so it looks like they got hit or mugged or something like that. But this is another emphasis of the one eye symbolism. And so there's a few different ways in which we tend to see it out there. So once again, just to recap, the triangle over the one eye, covering up one eye, A-OK over one eye, or the black eye. And I might even be missing examples, to be honest. And so these are just the things that came to my mind when I started putting this presentation together. Right. So here we are with the one eye, which is often, referred to as the eye of God, right? And all you have to do is take one eye and drop it into a triangle, and we have the symbolism of the all seeing eye, of the eye of providence. In occultism, too, you're going to see a lot of the same symbolism depending on who you're looking into. So, this is probably the most famous photo of Aleister Crowley, and he has this all seeing eye of providence symbol on his hat right there. And so this gets into as well the idea of the all-seeing eye being a reference to our third eye. Notice that it's on a hat on top of his head. And so many people relate the all-seeing eye to our third eye, the pineal gland. And as of late, I've kind of been saying, is it the third eye, or in actuality, is it the first eye? So something to chew on, which we'll be getting into over the course of this presentation. But notice the way he's posed here, and he has his arms to the side of his face. And then the all-seeing eye is in the middle. And so there is this repeated theme of this eye being related to a central pillar or a middle way in between polarities, in between duality, in between the pillars of Freemasonry. And so this is just something that's going to be repeated time and time again. And this is getting into the third eye thing, right? So if it's our third eye, it's implying that it's in between the two other eyes, right? Creating that triangle. So it's implying that it is the middle point between these polarities, masculine, feminine, black, white, etc. There's so many different ways of breaking it down, but it's always right there in the middle. And so this is a very important part in decoding, in my opinion, what this is all about. And then also too, his hat even looks like a triangle in and of itself, right? Also, he has a six-pointed star behind this triangle. And when you're creating a six-pointed star, like the Star of David, you know, you have an upright triangle and then you have a downward pointing triangle. And they're oftentimes just laid right over each other. And so this is another thing that's alluding to two polarities coming together, being the middle point or the middle way, or being the synthesis of these polarities, which is a very, very mercurial concept. Mercury is very much related to androgyny, the divine, androgyne, and yeah, it can go between these polarities. So it's neither masculine nor feminine. It's a synthesis of the two. It's neither black or white or whatever you want to say, positive or negative. It's a synthesis of the two. It can go all along the spectrum, which is why Mercury is related to being the messenger of the gods, because it can go anywhere, basically. And also, too, I'll just say the upright triangle being more masculine when we're creating the six-pointed star, which is the glyph for fire, and then the downward pointing triangle being more feminine and receptive, being the glyph for water. And so, again, the six-pointed star, the Star of David, being a fusion of this polarity. And that's why, too, Judaism, there's a lot of twin towers, twin tower symbolism, twin pillar symbolism within Judaism and esoteric Judaism and the Kabbalah, etc. And here is Madonna, right, wearing the pyramid with the capstone and the all-seeing eye on her jacket. So again, this has been all over the place. This is like nothing new. I'm sure for most people who are watching this, whether you're here live or you're watching it after the fact, you guys have seen this stuff over and over and over. But now is a good time for me just to point out that this pyramid is made of bricks. And so brick symbolism also has a connection to the twin pillars and duality and polarity, which I'll be getting into later on in the presentation. But let's not forget that the pyramid is made of bricks. The brick symbolism is very, very interesting and very deep. And it was maybe a couple years ago now during Gemini, I really went down a brick rabbit hole, and I was surprised to see that there are so many things related to brick symbolism that it just blew my mind. It's way deeper than what you would imagine, but it actually makes a lot of sense too, given the fact that, you know, bricks are how we build a lot of things, right? And so here we are once again with the pyramid and the all-seeing eye. So what's going on with eye symbolism, just in general, taking it out of the context of anything related to secret societies, Freemasonry, the Illuminati? What does just the one eye represent that we're getting into here? Well, there's a few ways of breaking it down, in my opinion. One way is just to acknowledge the Vesica Pisces and the Venn diagram, right? So when you take two circles and you overlap them, like I'm doing here, you'll see that the overlapping area creates a yoni, or it creates an eye. And this is really interesting because it also creates a seed. So symbolically, this is a seed. And so this also gets into arc symbolism and sacred center symbolism, which is basically a lot of what I'm going to be talking about today, is this idea of a sacred center, and that centers return to itself. And so centers will expand and then return to itself, not unlike a torus field, right? So when you have this Vesica Pisces symbol, you're dealing with the receptive quality of the yoni and the projective quality of the yoni, or the vagina, as well. This is where life comes from, right? And so in this way too, it's very much related to the womb as well, right? And therefore you can say the cosmic womb, even. But that's what I see in it. I see the eye, I see the seed, which seed symbolism is very much related to egg symbolism as well. And then I see vaginal symbolism, like I've been going on about. But this idea of an eye, right, is very much right there for you. And it's pretty obvious. Also, when you overlay circles like this, um, you can create the flower of life. And there's so many mathematical properties that are related to overlapping circles like this that it kind of boggles the mind, really. And I have a buddy, LC King. He gets into some of that stuff, the mathematical geometry sort of aspect of some of this stuff, and he has a lot of interesting things to say about, the Vesica Pisces and everything else. Also, too, we're dealing with the two overlapping, so polarity, so maybe perhaps a masculine and a feminine aspect, or just two units coming together, creating something new, something that is a synthesis, as I've been saying, between the two. And so in a way, what you're looking at too, you're looking at a gateway being created. And so when you have twin pillars, you are implying that there is a middle way, or that there is a gateway between those two pillars. So this is something that we'll be getting into. And for the sake of this presentation, I just had the circles be vertical, but easily they could be just turned, horizontally. So what you're dealing with is this like a trinity, basically: mother, father, child, right? And so those two pillars, you're basically doing the same thing: mother, father, and then that middle way can be symbolically looked at as a new way, or a childlike sort of essence, or there's a new quality being created when two things kind of come together. And so the Vesica Pisces is very much emblematic of this, in my opinion. And so that's why the yoni is a gateway. Our eyes are gateways. They're the gateway to the soul, right? That's what most people say. And so all you have to do is add a triangle, and you've got the symbolism of the all-seeing eye right there. As I've been saying, Trinity, the three, the two creating a third, mother, father creating a third, a child. And so I think it's really interesting that there is Trinity symbolism, triune symbolism baked into the all-seeing eye of providence symbolism via the triangle, right? And so this idea of three is an integral part of just kind of everything that we're going to be talking about. And so speaking of three, we have this idea of a third eye, as I've been saying. And again, is it our third eye, or in actuality, is it our first eye? And so this is a classic sort of diagram showing the chakras up your central pillar, which has a correspondence with our spine. Our spines have 33 vertebrae. And so this pineal gland is right here. And notice that it's right above a triangle, right? That's the symbolism, at least in this diagram, of what's associated with that chakra, that purple chakra. And it's a triangle with the third eye on top. Reminds me quite a bit, obviously, right, of the eye of providence, or the all-seeing eye, of Illuminati symbolism, right? And so this idea of the pineal gland being right where it's at, implying the third eye, it's emblematic, in my opinion, of Polaris in the night sky, as we will be seeing. And so our spines are symbolic of the world axis, and the world axis goes from the North Pole to the pole star. And so when we're looking at eye symbolism, this third eye symbolism right there in the middle, I think that there's a direct relationship between what's going on in the heavens and what's going on in our bodies. There's an as above, so below relationship with the order of the cosmos and the way humans have been designed. And so there's just so many epic things about this that I've been wanting to talk about. So also notice that there are twin serpents going up the spine. And so this is a reference to Kundalini energy. This is very mercurial stuff, right? So Mercury holds a caduceus. The caduceus is a wand, and there's twin serpents going up the wand. And then there are wings coming off of the wand. And it's not uncommon for there to be a bulb or a disc right there where the wings split off from. And so to me, the symbolism is very, very similar to the idea of Mercury being a psychopomp or a conductor of souls that is able to travel from realm to realm. Well, he travels from realm to realm via the world axis, via this northern axis from the North Pole to the North Star. And there are a lot of groups that suggest that in order to ascend, on an astral level and go to different planes to do different kinds of work, there's this whole idea of there are people out there, there are groups out there that have traditions of going to a palace in the sky or going to a temple in the sky and using the world axis at the north to get there. And so there are books about this, and there are many ascension traditions that use this central pole, this central axis, to get out of here, which I've been talking about for a little while now. So if you're unfamiliar with this concept, all you have to do is look at my previous live streams and some of my videos to kind of wrap your head around it. But needless to say, this idea of a world axis and going up the world axis to go to other places, which a lot of people say that the real stairway to heaven exists at the north. It goes to the northern sky, which I'm going to show you imagery here that alludes to all of that. This whole dynamic of a central axis, of a world axis, which I just relate to the world tree as well, and that trunk is that central axis. There's a correspondence with the world axis, which is also, by the way, the cosmic axis. I need to emphasize that more, that the world axis is the cosmic axis. It's the same thing. And so we're dealing with the gigantic toroid that we live within. We're dealing with that center point within the toroid, the hyperbola, I believe it's called. And so there's a relationship with the order and structure of our domain of this plane and our physical bodies. And when you understand that there's a correspondence there, a lot of this symbolism, at least in my opinion, becomes a lot more obvious. And so to me, when I look at a diagram like this, I see world axis symbolism because we are a product of the world tree or the torus field that everything exists within. And so to me, this is the relationship. And so the pole star has been called the eye of God, the eye in the sky. There's a lot of symbolism relating the northern sky to the throne of God. And so how many things have been said about the pineal gland that relates to godlike abilities or bringing you closer to God and your own godhood and things like that. And so the fact that there's a star in the night sky that the heavens revolve around that is at the top of the world axis, and then we also have this third eye, right there between our other eyes. I just think we're talking about some of the same symbolism, that there's an as above, so below patterning going on here. So I think, yeah, those are most of the points that I wanted to bring up, I guess, with this slide here. So moving on. And when you look at esoteric artwork, there is a lot of stuff going on within it that basically is like the exact same symbolism. It blows my mind. So I'm really fortunate because I have a friend. His name is Graham. Shout out to Graham if he ever happens to see this. Um, and he collects really impressive, interesting, obscure artwork from like, the 15th century to like now. And a lot of the stuff he's shown me has blown my mind. And he's getting it from like all over the place. And so he actually has some art that is very alchemical in nature, right? And so what are we looking at here? We're looking at, notice that there's an implied set of twin pillars right at the bottom with those globes and with what looks like these pedestals or whatever that they're on, and they're polar kind of in nature. They kind of imply pillars or towers or whatever. And then right in the middle you've got a much larger tower, and you've got a lot of the same symbolism that I was just alluding to. You have the twin serpents, and then you have the wings, and then right up top you have an eye. And so this a single eye. And so this is implying this middle way that I'm talking about, this third way. Or is it actually the first way? I think it's the first way, guys. That's kind of one of the things that I've been tripping out about lately, is that when you're dealing with pillars, you have to acknowledge the central pillar or the original pillar. And the original pillar is actually the central one. It's right there. It's the world axis. World axis symbolism is way more important than people realize. And there's a much larger tradition acknowledging it than what I think a lot of people realize. And so here you have this central pole with all of the same symbolism I've been getting all stirred up about. And you have this central eye up top. And who wouldn't assume that this eye is symbolic of God, right? And they're not wrong, because it is symbolic of God. And I'm going to put that in quotes because that means different things to different people. But it's symbolic of Polaris. And someone in a comment recently said they think that it's Polaris, um, which I think is very, very interesting. So once again, Polaris in the night sky, guys, it's still. So the heavens revolve around the North Star, revolve around Polaris. In my opinion, this is, I always refer to it as the preeminent gateway in the heavens. And so I think that a lot of ancient groups, a lot of occult groups, make reference to this gateway, this stairway to heaven. And so that single eye is symbolic of of everything that I'm talking about, basically. So the single pillar goes back to the world axis, and the single eye is also a reference to the world axis. In particular, the star that exists in the northern sky, in the middle of the northern sky, that is at the very end of the world axis. And so I think that this is a symbol of God's eye, essentially, that looks over everything. That's kind of the symbolism. And so the stars in the northern sky are referred to as, eternal stars, because there is this stillness. They're always dependable. They're always in the same spot. Mostly the pole star, though. That's the one that truly doesn't move. It's right there, and night after night after night, you can look in the same spot in the night sky and you're going to see Polaris. So it's always there. So there is this tranquility that's kind of associated with it because of that. There's a transcendence that's associated with it because of that. And so when most people look at this image, they're going to see this eye in the sky, and they might assume that it's the sun, but it's not the sun. I'm making the case that it's actually the pole star, and everything else that it represents. And look, you have a pole going right to it. It's the pole star. And so that's one of the things that I've noticed about older artwork and some Freemasonic art, is that they kind of want the pole star symbolism to be interpretive, that maybe someone who doesn't know any better might think it's the sun, but in actuality, the ones in the know what it actually symbolically represents. And then notice that there's rays coming from the eye, just like some of the slides I showed earlier. and the rays go right up to the eye, and it kind of just reminds me of a pyramid in a way. But here we are. This is a closer up detail of the illustration. And I have not decoded what it says up there. Maybe someone can screenshot it and look into it and write a comment, because I would be interested to know for sure. Right. So moving on. Here's another example. So in the world of Freemasonry, you're going to see a lot of pillars. You're going to see a lot of columns. You're going to see a lot of eyes. And this is kind of showing, a lot of the stuff that I'm going on about here. And so here you have 3 pillars, generally a feminine and a masculine pillar. And then you have that third pillar right in the middle. And then just above that, you have another eye of providence. It's not in the triangle, but, another eye of God, basically. And so it's implying that that middle pillar is the transcendence point. It is the gateway in and out of this domain. And the correspondence is with the world axis. Here's a Masonic tracing board. And I can tell just by the nature of how this tracing board has been illustrated that it's a more modern tracing board. You can also tell that it's not as high quality as a lot of the really high-end Masonic tracing boards that are out there. But nonetheless, the symbolism to me, it's all right there, basically. It's kind of showing you a lot of the same stuff that I'm going to be rattling on about here. And so here you have 3 pillars. One looks like it's very much related to solar energy. The other one looks like it's related to lunar energy. And the middle one looks like it's related to something else. Well, what would this something else be? Well, in my opinion, it has to do with the gateway to heaven, the ladder to heaven, Jacob's ladder, right? And it's alluding that this is a reference to the world axis, which is a bridge to the other side, basically. And so in the next slide here, I'm highlighting the all-seeing eye, the eye of providence. I'm also highlighting the ladder. And then I'm also highlighting the circumpunct. And so it's the circle with the dot right in the middle. And this symbol in and of itself has also been related to the eye. It's been called the eye of God. It's been called the God head. And I think it's an important symbol to wrap your head around for a few different reasons, because, in my opinion, it's a polar symbol. I know in astrology that this is the symbol for the sun, right? It's a dot with a circle around it. In my opinion, a lot of solar symbols were once polar symbols, and that there was a flip that happened. There was a switch that occurred where a lot of polar symbols were later used for solar purposes. And the best way I can put it, from my understanding, is that a lot of this this transition happened when we moved from geocentrism to heliocentrism. So when we had a more earth-based understanding of the cosmos, we basically we revered the northern sky more, and we revered the northern portion of Earth because this was considered the sacred center. And so geocentrism has a very strong link to the northern portion of Earth, to sacred center symbolism just in general, and also to the northern portion of the night sky, which includes Polaris. And so what I see within the circumpunct is literally the sacred center and the pole. So if you look at a circumpunct from the top down perspective, you are going to see a dot and you're going to see that circle. But imagine if it's 3D, you're actually seeing a pole within a hole. And so this is one of the things I keep on going on about, is the fact that a lot of symbolism, in my opinion, has to do with poles and holes. And I've gone over this in other presentations, but when you're dealing with world axis symbolism, once again, you're dealing with the pole. And one of the correspondent symbols that relates to the pole is actually a ladder. because again, it's a bridge to the other side. I did a presentation called Seven Gates to the Great Beyond, which kind of gets into some of this stuff. And so here you have a symbolic pole going to Polaris, in my opinion. And also regarding the circumpunct, um, it reminds me of the compass. And so there's a couple of compasses out there. There's compasses for navigational purposes. Where do they point? They point north, right? So that's one thing. And then there's also the drawing compass to create angles, to measure angles and to create circles. And so the circumpunct is very much related to that kind of compass, because you have to plant, one part of the compass somewhere on a piece of paper, and then you're drawing a circle around that point. The compass is symbolic of the heavens in Freemasonry, whereas the square is symbolic of Earth. Um, but when you look at the circumpunct, it has a direct relationship with that compass, because you're planting the compass on a piece of paper. That's the center point, and you're making a circle around it. This is very, very similar to Polaris in the night sky, where there's a central point in Polaris is the cosmic axis, and then all of the stars revolve around it. So there it is, the circumpunct, which looks very eye-like. It kind of looks like the evil eye, right? And so the eye symbolism with the circumpunct, it's very obviously there, right? It's the pupil, and then it's the eyeball. And so just to show you once again the eye symbolism that's related to the central pillar here. And so on the left side, you got your solar symbolism. On the right side with that pillar, you have your lunar symbolism. But then there's this other thing. What does the eye represent? Well, it represents Polaris. And there are rituals in Freemasonry that acknowledge Polaris. I've even heard, I read this recently and I was trying to find the quote, but the G is a substitute symbol in some Freemasonic rituals for Ursa Major. Ursa Major and Ursa Minor revolve around the pole star. And so that's kind of a different rabbit hole, but it's all very much related. But the G of Freemasonry, G is the seventh letter in the alphabet. Ursa Major and Ursa Minor each have 7 stars to them. And so there's a direct correspondence, in my opinion, with the G, with Ursa Major and Minor, with the northern sky. So when you're dealing with symbols that allude to Ursa Major or Ursa Minor, you're dealing with northern sky symbolism, right? And so this central pillar is related to the stairway to heaven, which is why Jacob's ladder, or that ladder, crosses over that central pillar. It all has to do with the northern sky, in my opinion. I think a lot of secret society symbolism is actually pretty much geocentric occultism, is what it is. And so if you're thinking like a heliocentrist, if you think that we live in a solar system and you're buying all of that hook, line, and sinker, it's going to be a lot harder for you to decode the symbolism, because you're thinking in a different paradigm. I think that a lot of the deep esoteric stuff within Freemasonry has to do with geocentrism, which, when you're talking about geocentrism, you have to acknowledge the power of the North Pole, and you have to acknowledge the power of the northern sky, and the fact that the heavens revolve around this point. Also notice that the ladder down below, it's really small, but at the very bottom of the ladder, you can see a book and what looks like a compass and square. And then right below that compass and square, you see another circumpunct. So again, that middle pillar being related to the circumpunct, the eye in the sky, the eye of God, the eye of providence, that middle pillar being emblematic of a stairway, of a gateway out of here, in and out of here, actually. Here's another example, and I love this illustration. This could be a whole episode, because I'm seeing so much stuff going on in here, and I've had new revelations about this artwork because of some things that I've heard over the last couple of weeks. And so at some point, I might just do a deep dive in this specific illustration. So notice all of the traditional stuff is there, though. The pillar on the left, the pillar on the right, and then above, that central pillar that's always implied when you're dealing with twin pillars. That central pillar is very much there. You can see it with a ray of light, right? Just below the all seeing eye. Um, on the left hand side, you see lunar symbolism. On the on the left hand side, you see solar symbolism. On the right hand side, you see lunar symbolism. And then, so what does that mean for what's in the middle? It's polar symbolism, as in the pole star, as in the world axis. So that's what you're dealing with here. And so when you zoom in up top, it says, "Let there be light," and there was light. So I almost feel like I might be jumping the gun to mention this here, but I have to say it. But I am following a thread of information that suggests that light, let there be light. That light has been turned into other substances, and that everything in the material world goes back to light. Basically, that light is the original substance that everything else potentially was made from, but specifically water. That light, it's possible that light gets turned into water, and that there is a process in which water came from light, and that it's condensed light, it's liquid light. Water is liquid light, basically. And so I think some of this stuff is alluding to that, and that's what I want to get into. If I break down this tracing board or this illustration, I want to get into all of that stuff. And it relates to arc symbolism and the royal arch of Freemasonry, and the flood and deluge, and just so many different things. But I think that that's another deep, deep encode with, just light symbolism in general. And obviously, when you close your eyes, you're not seeing the light spectrum. You open your eyes and then you see it. And the power of water is just absolutely incredible. It's amazing. But here you see that central pillar, like I've been going on about. And so I think that we live in essentially a trinity system where, if you're only acknowledging the moon and the sun as kind of like the polarities here, and you're not acknowledging this third thing, which is the pole star, Polaris, I think you're going to be missing a lot of important symbolism. I think you're going to be missing a lot of information. We live in a trinity system, and it should be acknowledged that the third thing is related to the world axis and Polaris. So there it is again. So this is a illustration of Pythagoras, and I believe this comes from Secret Teachings of All Ages. And I've been wanting to break this down too, because I see so much polar symbolism within it. It's pretty wild. And so you wouldn't know it at first glance, but I think that that is what this illustration is actually all about. It's all about the sacred center, and it's all about that central pillar. And so notice, the first thing I want to point out is, notice that in his right hand, he's holding a pyramid. And notice behind the pyramid, there's a very obvious column there. There's a very obvious pillar. And so there are twin pillars in this illustration. There's one on the left, and then you can see the one on the right. Some people might call this the pillars of Hercules, Boaz, Jachin, etc., but it's there. And so he's holding that pyramid right in front of this pillar or column, alluding to, in my opinion, just the single pillar or the central pillar. As I've been saying, if you just take one eye and you're looking at a photo of one eye, it's alluding to the original eye, and it gets into everything that I'm talking about. When you're looking at just one pillar, it gets into the central pillar or the first pillar or the third pillar, if you want to call it that. And so I think that him holding the pyramid in front of this column is alluding to the world axis, in my opinion. There's obviously a triangle above his head as well, which I feel like I can make the argument that this is another symbol related to that. And like I was saying earlier, there are various groups that believe that to ascend, you go to the north and you work with northern constellations, and it's a whole science. There's a lot of things going on there, which I'm not going to get into right now. But what is a better symbol of ascension than either the pillar or column itself with snakes wrapped around it, like we've been seeing, or the triangle itself or pyramid itself. It just implies upward movement. It's an arrow pointing up, right? And so it's not just an arbitrary sort of thing that is just pointing up in the sky. When you look at the deep encode of it, we're talking about a very specific portion of the night sky, in my opinion. Um, and so when you zoom in here, by the way, there are several things that relate to the circumpunct, in my opinion. And so I'm going to hide my. So it said StreamYard just said something weird. Okay. What I'm going to do here is it says that it's removing my audio. I don't know if that's true when I remove my video. But I'm just going to move forward as is. And so notice where his hand is pointing to on this blueprint here. It's pointing to the middle of a circle, just like the circumpunct. Okay, that is very strategic. That is that is intentional. Obviously, his hand could be pointing at anything, but his hand is pointing at the very middle of the circle. And then right above the circle, you see a compass, right? How do you make that circle? You're going to use a compass to make it, right? If you want a perfect circle. And then on the left, you see what looks kind of like a tablet, and you see a world tree with a very emphasized um, tree trunk, which is, as I've been saying, symbolic of the world axis. And then one of the symbols on that tablet is the circumpunct as well. And so this is sacred center symbolism. It's world pillar symbolism, in my opinion. Um, and so the other thing that I was pointing out on the left is there's another set of there's another compass essentially. And so there's a lot going on here that I could get into, but suffice it to say, there is some very sneaky sacred center symbolism going on in this illustration that I wanted to point out. Also, and I have not really looked into this line of mythology myself, but it's been told to me several times. Several people have relayed this to me that there is a myth about Pythagoras having a golden thigh. And when you're dealing with thigh symbolism, you're dealing with Ursa Major, which is in the northern sky. And so the Egyptians used the thigh of a bull as a reference to Ursa Major. Thigh symbolism is completely related to what's going on in the northern sky. So the fact that Pythagoras himself has thigh symbolism associated with his mythology, I find to be like really, really interesting because I think that they're encoding northern stuff in there. So again, if you weren't aware of this material, you would look at this, have one interpretation. Once you're aware of pillar symbolism, the world axis, sacred center, circumpunct, blah, 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 I think that a lot of these details actually really come to life, in my opinion. So moving on here. So again, this central pillar, it looks just like a column. And so when you're dealing with the column, it looks very much like Roman numeral 1, as in also to like the magician card, which is number 1. And the magician is always holding that wand, which is another symbol related to the world axis, as I've broken down before. But you're also dealing with the letter I, right? So we're dealing with the all-seeing eye. Isn't it interesting that the I, we say it exactly the same way we refer to the letter I, which is a reference to self, me, myself, and I, right? And so to me, there's a direct correspondence between all of these different things. But I think the key that unlocks all of it, in my opinion, is the world axis and the relationship we have with it. So, my opinion, I've heard this from more than one source, but that the shape of the letter I literally is a direct reference to the world axis. So even in the Norse runes, Isa is just a central pillar sort of symbol. It's just one line. It's just a vertical line, just like an I. And I think that this is kind of like part of the same sort of concept is that I and that pillar, the central pillar, it's all the same stuff. And I've also heard This is from the Bach Saga. So I know some people are fans of it, others aren't. But according to the Bach Saga, the lowercase I is a symbol of the world axis. And then the dot on top is literally the pole star, the eye of God, pole iris. Okay. So when I see the I, the lowercase I or the uppercase I, or Roman numeral one or a wand or whatever, it's all the same stuff, in my opinion. So this also too symbolic of, you know, your spine and the pineal gland, you know, your third eye, Polaris. There's a relationship between all of these different things. But it all goes back to the pole, which pole is at the heart of polarity, as in positive and negative. Polarity is what you need to understand in order to use magnetism and electricity. It's a very important thing to understand when you're dealing with the torus field. And so the pole basically is emblematic of the above and the below. It separates the above and the below, but it also connects the above and the below, which is what you know, pole symbolism represents, in my opinion, which I've gotten into in other streams. So when you're looking at the tree of life, the Kabbalistic tree of life, I've broken this down before, but it's good for review because of everything that I'm talking about here. There's a few things that I just want to point out right off the bat, but there is the pillar of severity and pillar of mercy, the pillars on the side, but there's also this central pillar. So once again, when you see twin pillars, there's an implied third pillar. Here in the Kabbalistic tree of life, you're actually seeing that third pillar, right? And notice that this third pillar goes above and below the other pillars because this is the pillar of transcendence. This is the world axis. And so also notice too, at least in this diagram, Kether, the top Sephiroth, it has the symbol for air in it, right? And so the symbol for air is a triangle with a line through it. It looks exactly like a pyramid with a capstone. And then even too, the central pillar there, or the central Sephiroth, also has a circumpunct on it too that I'm just noticing. And so when you're dealing with the Kabbalistic tree of life, to me, you're dealing with world axis symbolism, which is also the world tree, the tree of life. And so here are those three pillars. Once again, that central pillar going above and below the other pillars. But it all comes back to that one pillar, which I've been saying is potentially the first pillar, not the third pillar. And it looks like an eye, Roman numeral 1, etc. It's very phallic. And God, I love this illustration too. I think I found this, you know, within the last like month and a half or something like that. But geez, I mean, it's becoming kind of one of my favorite illustrations that I think I've ever seen because it encodes so much of what I like to talk about and what I've been going on and on and on about. And it does it in such an elegant, beautiful way. Wow. I mean, it's just gorgeous. I would love to know if there's somehow any prints available of this or even a higher resolution version of it because I'm just like in awe. I love it. I think it's fantastic. And so here you see this is the Jacob's ladder scene. So you see a ladder going up to the heavens, very much where the sky is opening up, obviously, for this central pillar. Notice that there are 7 stars around this central pillar. This is exactly like the pole star in the northern sky with Ursa Major revolving around it and Ursa Minor also revolving around it, which has 7 stars. So when you see 7 stars or 7 dots or 7 layers, or you're talking about 7 veils, anything related to the septenary sort of system, the number 7, I automatically think now the northern sky and Ursa Major. It's all right there. If you look at the Chariot card, which is the 7th card in the Major Arcana, you'll see a lot of similar symbolism because it's all of this stuff is baked into that card. And so even the Charioteer in the Rider Waite deck, he has a star above his head, and there's a canopy of stars above that. But that central star, that star on his head, is symbolic of the North Star, the guiding star, right? And so this central pillar has vines wrapped around it too, very similar to Kundalini energy, the Kundalini serpents, very mercurial. And Mercury too, by the way, is very much related to the pole and very much related to the phallus. So I've broken that down several times as well. And so if you're interested in that material, you can look at other videos, especially the Magician's Wand video. But that central pillar is what I've been saying, is that is the way out of here. Um, and so it's kind of just showing you here. And so when I see what looks like potentially a sun above that pillar, I actually don't think it's a sun. I think it's a symbolic pole star. I think it's symbolic of the North Star. And that kind of gets into what I've been saying earlier, that I think some of these Masonic illustrations, they want it to be interpretive. They want it to kind of be maybe vague, or they want people to assume that it's just solar symbolism, but in actuality, it's not. In my opinion, it makes way more sense that this is actually referring to the pole star than anything else. And to me, what it kind of looks like, just looking at the artwork, because you see the moon in the background on the left-hand side there, it almost looks like the sun has already set. It looks like the sun has already set, and it looks like you can see the moon, and then you see symbolically the stars of Ursa Major around the central pole, and then you see that what actually is a star above, which basically could also be an eye. You know, this illustration, the illustrator could have just put another all-seeing eye up there, right? And I think the symbolism would be virtually the same, pretty much. So yeah, I love what's going on here. I think it's gorgeous. And so this is the ceiling of a Freemasonic lodge in London. And when I came across this, it really blew my mind. I was like, holy shit. I'm like, it's so overt and obvious, everything that's kind of going on with it. And then I was surprised to see that the lodge itself acknowledges the central star as Polaris, the pole star. So what you're seeing here is you're seeing a central star on the ceiling, the pole star, and then you're seeing the ladder going to the pole star, and then what you're seeing too are the signs of the zodiac around that circle. And so what you're seeing, a symbolic artistic interpretation of the heavens, basically. But they openly acknowledge that that star is the pole star. It's Polaris. And so the idea, in my opinion, of what they're trying to do is that it's an as above, so below thing. So depending on your cosmology, how you see the heavens, that's how you should set up your ritual space. And that's how you should set up your home. And that's how you should set up your community. And so you're trying to mirror what the heavens are doing. And so why wouldn't you? So if the heavens look a certain kind of way to you, if there is this central star and then kind of everything emanates out of that, you're trying to mimic that. If it's good enough for the gods and for the heavens and for the cosmos, it's good enough for me. You know, if this is how it's designed above, then that's how I'm going to design it below. And so in a way, if you're performing a ritual underneath this space, you're basically saying that your ritual or your intention is reverberating through the cosmos via the world axis, which is the bridge to the other side. And so once again, it's an illustration, or excuse me, it's a photo that I've showed many times, but the pole star is in the middle and the stars around it revolve and revolve and revolve and go around it. But that pole star is going to be stationary. And once again, if you look at that portion of the night sky, you're going to see it in the same spot over and over and over. It's everything else that moves around it, not unlike a top, not unlike a wheel, etc. Reminds me a lot of the Circumpunct, doesn't it? Makes a lot of sense that the Circumpunct is actually a polar symbol, and that's its origins was more polar in nature before it got shifted over into being a solar symbol. And this is the thing I've seen multiple times, by the way. The other kind of classic example I give is with, I don't have it here, but it's with the quartered circle. So it's the circle with a cross in it. Um, a lot of people say that this is a solar symbol, and that's what a lot of modern people say. That's what a lot of books say. But if you go into the origins of it, you're going to see world axis symbolism baked into it. That's what it represents, in my opinion. So there's a number of symbols that people are very quick to say that it's just all solar based. They're all solar worshipers. We live in a solar system. Well, if that's what you believe, then of course that's going to be the interpretation. But what if you don't believe we live in a solar system, like myself? I believe our system is actually more accurately called a polar system, and because everything seems to revolve around this central pole. It just changes everything. It's a bit of a paradigm shift. But my argument here is that this is a polar symbol originally. And then, this just reminds me of concentric rings, right? Which reminds me a lot of Atlantis and the idea that people used to live in ringlands. And that there was within your ringland, there was a sacred center, and you might have your family tree there, which is symbolic of the world tree. And so this is a presentation that I want to do at some point as well. This idea of, the ring lands and what that represents. Lord of the Rings. I think it's Lord of the Ring lands, basically. Um, and this is what you see in the natural world. So all you have to do is look at, you know, the growth rings of a tree. There's the middle point, and then every year there's a new ring that's kind of added to it. And so everything starts from a center and expands from there. Just like rippling water, you throw a pebble in water, there's going to be that first ring, the first break, and then there's just going to be further ripples from that. And so the circumpunct is related to the sacred center, which is related to the central pillar. And so here's a classic illustration. I actually love this version of the compass and square. And within the compass and square Freemasonry, it's not uncommon to see a G, and it's not uncommon to see this I, right? And as I was saying earlier, the G is the seventh letter of the alphabet. And so I think there's a lot to be said regarding G and its relationship to the seven stars of Ursa Major and Ursa Minor. As we just saw in the one of the earlier illustrations, the seven stars that they're showing around that central pillar. To me, it's all the same stuff. And the compass itself too, the point of pivot with the compass, right? This is symbolic too of the North Star, in my opinion. And this is where this gets into a lot of things having to do with angles and angels and the heavens being more so related to circles and spheres and domes, while the earth is more so related to squares and corners, the four corners of earth. This is very much related to foundation symbolism, which has a lot to do with 90-degree angles and things like that. But when I see this here, I just see polar symbolism like all throughout it personally. And just to reiterate, I know I already said this once, but I was just reading about the G being used as a symbol for Ursa Major in some Freemasonic rituals. And then also the plumb line being used as a symbol for the world axis within Freemasonry as well. I think there's a lot of geocentric occult symbolism baked into the Freemasonic tradition, personally. And so kind of going back to this pyramid idea, I mean, God, I want to see these in person. So that's the first thing that comes to mind. But notice the bricks, all of the bricks that it takes to create such a structure. And I know I said earlier that I would get into brick symbolism a little bit. So here we are. So just acknowledging the bricks to build a pyramid, which to me, the pyramid is really it's symbolic of a world mountain. And so this is called the Sri Yantra. And this is like a 3D version of a 2D design. You guys have probably seen it. It's an Eastern thing. But this schematic is sacred center symbolism all day. It's polar symbolism all day. There's even that dot right in the middle from which everything expanded from and also returns to, just like a torus field. Notice that the square is emphasized outside of the lotus petals, And then there's four, it looks almost like tau crosses or T's coming out from the four sides. I was just talking about, the number four and how it relates to foundations and earth and everything else. But this illustration, which I've seen for years now, right? It's like a meditative tool and it means a lot of different things. But to me, at the end of the day, it's a sacred center symbol. What I wasn't aware of until maybe a few months ago is that there is a 3D counterpart to the symbol. And this is exactly what it looks like. So notice that everything builds up very much like a pyramid. And so the idea of a sacred center, generally, when you're talking about the center of this plane, the northern part of this plane, there's a lot of symbols. There's a lot of lore and myths that say that what exists at the center of the plane is a world mountain, Mount Meru, with its four rivers, right? Also, there's a lot of symbolism that suggests that there's a receptive thing at the north, like a hole or a gateway or an opening, which there is. There's actually, I would say that there's both. There's a pole and a hole at the north, symbolically, just like a torus field. There's that central pole, the hyperbola, but then also there is literally the hole, where the hyperbola actually exists. So there's both a projective and a receptive thing going on at the north, just like a torus field. But the main thing with this slide is that I just wanted to show you guys that this is very much symbolic of a central mountain, of a world mountain, symbolic of ascension and, potentially astral travel and going to another plane. And I think that that's really what these pyramids are all about, essentially, when you just break them down for what they are. They're mountains, they're world mountains. And mountain symbolism is like really deep. You can get into that all day long, but they're kind of just man-made mountains. And I don't think it's too much more complicated than that at its core. I think that there are so many secrets we do not understand about the ancient world. I'm not arrogant enough to say that I have it all figured out or whatever. But at the end of the day, how could you deny that this looks like a mountain or a world mountain, which means it's the central mountain at the north, like Mount Meru? And so that's what I wanted to emphasize here, is all of that stuff. And again, the bricks. Well, brick symbolism, guys, you're dealing with masonry, like actual literal masonry, like physical masonry, with bricks and building things and, whatever. And so that's what Freemasonry is all about. That's a lot of the symbolism that they've baked into their whole entire tradition is literally masonry and what is going on there. And so, at first, I did not understand the connection here with bricks and with Freemasonry, but now I totally do, and I totally get it. And so with Freemasonry, you're always dealing with the twin pillars. When you're dealing with the twin pillars, you're also dealing with Gemini symbolism. Look at the glyph for Gemini. The glyph for Gemini is literally Roman numeral 2. And so it implies that there's twins, right? Each vertical line is one of the twins. And so when you're dealing with twin symbolism, you're dealing with the hero twins. And there's always a good twin and an evil twin, a light twin and a dark twin. In most myths, one of the twins, the evil twin, will kill the good twin. And so this goes back to like Cain and Abel stuff. And so Cain killed Abel. And so sometimes the lover's card, by the way, back in the day was actually called the brother's card. And the lover's card corresponds with Gemini. And Gemini corresponds with Mercury, which means Hermeticism, as in Hermes and everything mercurial. We're dealing with a Hermetic tradition here. And so Hermes Mercury is like a huge, huge deal to this whole entire tradition. And as I've been saying, Mercury corresponds with the pole, with the phallus. And so when you're dealing with just one of the lines, one of the pillars, one of the columns, you're dealing with mercurial symbolism, from what I gather. And so it's interesting, though, that with hero twin symbolism, there are at least a few myths out there, including some really big ones, where the hero twins of their pantheon, of their respective pantheon, are responsible for building the first wall in the town. This is the myth or one of the myths that I'm referring to is with Romulus and Remus. And so these are the hero twins of Rome. And so even Rome comes from Romulus because they are the founders of Rome and they are responsible for building the first wall in Rome. And so out of what? Bricks. And this is where the good twin killed the evil twin. And so brick symbolism has also to do with the fact that apparently way back in the day, and this is according to a book that I have called Babylonian Star Lore by Gavin White. That book is so awesome, man. I mean, there's so many things that I've learned from that book. It's seriously, it's legit. I would get it if you guys are even remotely interested. So once again, Babylonian Star Lore by Gavin White. He was saying in that book that according to the Babylonians, that Gemini, the time of Gemini, was referred to as the brick mold. And the reason for this was because of the fact that they would resume construction projects and baking bricks out in the sun during the time of Gemini. So Gemini's nickname was the brick mold. And so, obviously with astrology, it's like all of these signs usher in different seasons, or different times of the season. So then, at the beginning of spring, it makes sense to be certain things, but to be doing certain things versus say winter, you're doing something else because the weather's changing. And so during Gemini, they would start baking bricks out in the open sun and they would resume building things with these bricks. And so they have a direct correspondence as well with Gemini and bricks. So once again, masonry, the twin pillars, the twins of of world mythology, because there's a lot of hero twins out there. And again, a lot of these hero twins built the first wall in their respective town or city. And so what you're seeing here is an illustration of Romulus and Remus helping build the first wall in Rome using bricks. And it's been a while since I've looked into this storyline, but my understanding is that the hero twins here are this figure on the left that has a square and he looks like he's measuring the bricks, and then the figure on the right that's holding some sort of pole prop. And so those are the hero twins, but it's showing you the relationship between hero twins, Gemini, twin pillars, with bricks. This is very much a thing. And so I just think it's interesting that the pyramid itself is made up of bricks, and a lot of people don't realize that there is a lot of brick symbolism has to do with twin pillars and twins and Freemasonry and all that kind of stuff, right? So I think you guys get the idea. And again, one of them was killed at this wall. So I pretty much said everything I wanted to say with that, but Gemini was associated with the brick mold. And even kind of looks like a brick a little bit. The interior of the Gemini glyph kind of looks like a little brick or something. So there you go, just showing you bricks, right? And also, oh man, I'm not going to get into it. But there was a brick ritual that happened a few years ago out in the public that happened during Gemini. And maybe I'll go into it at some point, but it's so obvious. It's so crazy. I mean, it blew my mind when it was happening. I was like, oh my God, they're doing a brick mold ritual. This is nuts. All right. So to break down some of the language here, Inuit coeptus, which basically, from my understanding, means something along the lines of Providence favors our undertakings, right? And then I just want to point out, this is not so much the focus of this presentation, but Nut, the Egyptian goddess that is the night sky, that is the arch. And notice that there's an arch of text above the pyramid. And notice that it's broken right in the middle of the arch. It's almost like there's this opening there between these two words on the side of the all-seeing eye. To me, it's symbolic of that gateway, of that opening, basically. And then down below, Novus Ordo Seclorum, New Order of the Ages, which is basically where we get New World Order from and the NWO from. And so To me, the revelation here with New World Order is this idea of order. And what does order represent symbolically? And it's something that I've gotten into lately. So here's another like Freemasonic illustration. It's the twin a double-headed eagle, and then down below you see this is order ab chaos, right? So this idea of order and chaos is a thing that is baked into Illuminati symbolism, in my opinion. And so order ab chaos, order out of chaos. If you guys have been following my work, this is something that I've been very interested in as of late. And if you really want to know, like if you want to get into the weeds with it, you guys should totally check out my presentation called Decoding Chaos. So I originally gave this presentation on the Interverse podcast channel. Shout out to Chance. He does awesome work. I love talking to that guy. He's an incredible person. I really can't say enough good things about him. And so he had me on, and I wanted to talk about the nature of chaos and the nature of order and how it relates to the world axis. And so if you want to get into the details with that, check this out. I mirrored it on my channel. But what I get into is this idea that the world axis, this central column or central pillar, is what brought order to chaos. And that in the early development of the cosmos, everything was basically it's been referred to as like a cosmic heap. So all of the elements were kind of like together in this soup, and there was nothing that was separate, basically. And so it was chaos. There was no order to the situation. And so all of the elements and everything that ever existed was in this was like an amalgamation of this substance, basically. And it wasn't until the world axis came to be, however it came to be, but it wasn't until this pillar, this symbolic pillar, separated everything, did we have space. Did we have space for the elements to do their thing? Did we actually have some sort of structure in this reality? And that's exactly what the world axis represents, guys. That's one of the things that I'm like super jazzed about, is that the world axis symbolically represents its function. And so what it does is it brings order to the cosmos. It brings order to the heavens, because it gives everything to it gives a point of pivot for everything. It allows some sort of structure, because everything revolves around this world axis. And so now there's like a rhythm and there's like a pattern to everything. And so here what you're looking at is the Weeping Virgin, and you see a broken pillar symbolic of chaos. So there is this deep sort of thing relating woman to chaos, and not in a bad way, in my opinion. And there's also an encode that her hair is symbolic of chaos. And so what you see here is a patriarchal figure in Kronos, Father Time, and he's separating her hair. This is symbolic of the separation that the world pillar brought from the above and the below. It separated the above and the below, and it also connects the above and the below as well. And so I think that's what you're kind of seeing here, is that her hair is tangled, and Father Time is separating her hair, not unlike God separating the elements and actually creating space here. So again, my Decoding Chaos presentation really gets into this. And so if you're interested, you should absolutely check it out. And I've been referring to this image a lot lately, because I think it says so much with so little. And this is a Freemasonic thing. And this is one of my favorite versions of this little scene here. And so this is the Magician card. This is the Thoth version of the Magician. And so notice right behind him is that world axis. Notice that there's the wings above, and then there's that disc as well. And there's even like serpentine symbolism going on right above his head. But it's the first card in the major arcana. It's the world axis. So to me, the Magician card lines up with the world axis so much, because what do we have before the Magician card? It's the Fool. And especially in this deck, I don't have the artwork here, but it is very chaotic. So the Fool The 0 is more so in chaos, symbolic of chaos, from which everything came from. And then the 1 brings order. The world axis brings order. The phallic symbolism brings order because it gives you something to look up to. It gives you something to revolve around. It gives you some sort of structure, you know. And so to me, that's what the world axis represents. It brings structure to the heavens, the same way Polaris symbolically brings structure in that everything revolves around it. The same way an axle allows a wheel to even work. Or that center point allows a mill to turn and spin and everything else. And so to me, that is the function of the world pole. It brings order, which is why I think the 4 elements, the objects of the 4 elements in the magician card are so neatly placed on this table, because the magician holds up that wand, and which is symbolic of order, as I've been saying. And so therefore the elements are in order on the table, and the magician is doing the as above so below position. And so he's implying that, like, I'm connected with both what's happening above and what's happening below. I connect what's above and below, but I also separate what's above and below. And he's kind of mirroring this concept that God separated things. And there's illustrations, which I don't have here either, of God literally separating the elements and doing the above below position to separate the heavens from earth, or separating lunar symbolism from solar symbolism. It's the same sort of thing. And so the world axis, which, as I've been saying, has a direct correspondence with the eye, it implies order in and of itself. So when the Illuminati, if you want to call it that, um, when they say New World Order, what they're implying, in my opinion, is they're saying that they want to become the new focus, or the new world axis. They want to be the new point of pivot that everything revolves around. Or I think there's a few ways of interpreting it. Or by putting it on money, they're saying that this is your new pole, that there's a pole shift away from self towards the monetary system and making money. So when I hear New World Order, I hear New World Axis, as in a pole shift, as in a shift of focus, basically. And so to me, that's really powerful that they would even be saying that. But that's how I personally decode it, based on everything that I've kind of outlined here. I know I have at least a few more slides, but hopefully that's clear. New World Order is symbolic of a pole shift, and pole shifts can happen in lots of different ways. But the idea is that people's focus is shifted now. And so the same way with geocentrism, the focus was more towards, northern symbols, in my opinion, the northern sky, things like that, or your sacred center. And there was a pole shift away from that. There was a pole shift away from the pole star to the sun. And so that is the New World Order. The New World Order also might be emblematic of the introduction of heliocentrism. That is the New World Order. You're no longer going to be acknowledging the cosmology of the ancients. That's holistic. You're not going to be acknowledging this new cosmology, which is all solar based. And so therefore, the sun is the new pole star in a lot of ways. I think there's a lot to be said about that. So again, it all goes back to the pole. The pole brings order, and there's traditions too that say that the world axis is like the symbol of order, the symbol of authority, the symbol of power, which is why so many kings and emperors and things like that, people in power, they like to hold a pole, they like to hold a scepter, because there's this old tradition that basically says, like, hey, you're holding kind of like a phallus, you're holding something that actually brings order. Another myth that I'll just say real quick that maybe can help illustrate what I'm trying to get at here is in a book called The Night of the Gods by John O'Neill. I can't remember where this myth comes from, but I believe it was an island culture had this early myth about the world being completely covered in water. And it wasn't until an island actually formed out of the waters was there any land at all. And so this is their early cosmology of how everything came to be. And this island just floated around the plane, just floated around the world ocean, because it didn't have anything to stabilize it. And so it was just meandering and it was just wandering and it was lost. And it wasn't until the first tree sprouted and grew and developed roots did the island stay still. So it required the world tree, a symbolic world tree, to stabilize the island. And then from there, then, animals and life and stuff started growing on it and whatever. But it needed an axis symbol to stabilize it. And so it needed that penetrative, almost like an anchor sort of thing to anchor down the island. And so the idea that the world axis relates to order is like, again, definitely a thing. And there's a number of myths to me that suggest that. And so I just thought I would throw that out there too. So hopefully that helps. So once again, just kind of going back to one of the earlier illustrations, there's that pole and then there's that eye. So new world order. There's a new world axis away from the old world axis, right? And like I said, there's a few ways of interpreting that, in my opinion. And just driving it home once again, just kind of what's going on with the all-seeing eye, the eye of providence, and how it's symbolic of that central axis, in my opinion. And that's what I got. So hopefully you guys appreciate that and like what I'm putting out there. Honestly, if you have any comments, I would love to read them in the description or on the video link itself. And I'm curious. I'm curious to see what you guys think about this one. If I'm on the money, if there's things that I'm missing out. I feel as though that there is more to be said about all of this, but this is obviously my first take at just kind of getting some of these ideas off my chest. But I think that there's a direct relationship with the world axis, the all-seeing eye, the idea of New World Order, and I think a lot of Freemasonic symbolism is pretty much alluding to all of this stuff. And I've been referring to it now as geocentric occultism or magic, which I don't think they want us to be aware of personally. It's way more holistic. It makes way more sense. Things are more orderly when you look at things that way, in my opinion. Heliocentrism, not so much. So I've, for the most part, dropped that way of thinking. And so I'm not so much solar based anymore. I'm more polar based with everything, if you couldn't tell. All right. So getting on to the credits here. Maybe, I don't know. I'll just full screen this thing. Right. So if you guys would like to support the channel, there's a few ways to do it. But basically, all of the ways you can do it can be found at symbolicstudies.com. So I really appreciate any and all support. It really goes a long way. So check it out, symbolicstudies.com. Or you can join me on Patreon, patreon.com/symbolicstudies. And I just wanted to mention, in case you weren't aware, I have an elemental study packet. And so it's 4 pages, and I break down the symbolism and the correspondences for each element. And honestly, there's a lot of really good information in here. And I try and look at my study packet as we enter each sign, just to refresh my memory about, some of the basic things about each sign. The modality, the planets associated with the sign, the house, the body part, the mantra, the tarot card, the cell salt, all sorts of things. So all of the signs of astrology are accounted for in here. And this is actually a name your price offering. So if you just want an elemental study packet, it comes to you via PDF. I have instructions on my website on how to get it, but it's name your price. And so, long story short, if you send any donation of any size to my Cash App or PayPal or Venmo, include your email address, and I'll send you this PDF. Conversely, you can also sign up for my Patreon, and anyone who signs up gets this study packet as well. And so, yeah, so there's that. Also, I'm available for tarot readings and study sessions. You can text me or DM me. My phone number is 503-893-4606. Tarot readings are fairly straightforward, but study sessions, not as much. But basically, the idea is that if you think there's something I can help you out with symbolically, or if you want to have just one-on-one time to talk about pretty much anything related to the work that I put out here, get in touch. So I've essentially created custom lessons for people having to do with the tarot or mythology, things like that. People have hit me up to review their like artwork and their poetry and everything else. And so I think that's really cool. I really enjoy doing study sessions, and I really like tarot readings as well. So if either of those interest you, like I said, send me a message or shoot me a text. Also, I'm available for art direction and design. I mentioned it earlier, but I've been a graphic designer for 20 years, and I've done like everything under the sun, I guess you could say, everything under the pole star. And so I've done, album covers and t-shirts and websites and, kind of you name it, honestly. And for a while, I kind of wanted to keep this separate from symbolic studies, and so I just don't think that makes sense anymore. I don't know why I did that for so long. So I'm just offering my services to people who might be interested. And actually, I'm working with someone right now who hit me up because of this little advertisement here, and we're doing some really cool stuff together. And they've been awesome to work with. So if those are the kinds of clients I can get from just putting this out there, then I am all for it because they are rad. So shout out to Molly if she is watching. You've been awesome to work with. I'm also making available my PO box, which I've had for way too long, and I don't advertise it really. But if there's snail mail of any kind that you want to send me, feel free. So PO Box 930, Carson, Washington 98610. Lastly here, so my girlfriend has a channel on YouTube called Michelle's Healing Home, and she has two shows. One of them is called The Healing Home, and so she does interviews with people who are more so, I mean, I would say very independently minded, health and wellness minded people, sound healers and herbalists and things like that. And personally, I think she's had some top tier guests already. She's only been doing it for a few months, but it's been really awesome to see her grow in that regard. So that show is called The Healing Home. And then also we have a show together called Last Thursday, and we go live every Thursday. We had our maiden voyage a couple of weeks ago. We went live a few days ago or a couple days ago on Thursday. We're going to go live again this Thursday. So that show is called Last Thursday. It's with me and my girl. And honestly, it's so much fun. We've been talking about doing this for a while, and I'm so glad we pulled the trigger because we've only done 2 episodes, but I'm having a great time. So anyways, perhaps you guys can join us. And with that, I'm going to check the chat and see what's going on. Hopefully I see some familiar faces. Let's see what's happening here. Oh, nice. Cool. Very cool. I got a super chat. That's the first one I've ever received. Jonah Ryan, thank you so much. Okay, let me read this. You also need to look into the Vatican and the North symbolism, obelisk in the square. Yeah, absolutely. Located in Pinecone District. Nice. There you go. So 30-inch tall pine cone in Pinecone Courtyard. The caduceus with pine cone engraved. Yeah, dude. You got it. I can't believe I didn't even mention the pine cone. But yeah, you guys are spot on. I'm not surprised that there is people here who totally get it and know what's up with all this stuff. So interesting. So someone here is saying heliocentrism was the old world order, not the new world order. Interesting. I don't know. So you think heliocentrism came before geocentrism? Maybe you can expand on that. Let's see here. Hello, hello. I'm seeing some new faces. Thank you guys for hanging out. Much appreciated. Gordy, what's going on, dude? My buddy LC King is in the house. Right. So he's saying, yeah, the word sun was originally related to the world axis, not the ball of fire in the sky. Same with Helios and Sol. So if you guys are unfamiliar, check out LC King here on YouTube. We actually did a couple of episodes recently breaking down astrological symbolism. And a lot of it was his work. He brought a lot of things to the table. Obviously, I'm chiming in with what I know and everything else, but he's a good dude and he brings some awesome information that I had not really considered. What's up, Hank? Flat Earth Hippie. Thank you so much, man. I appreciate it. Oh, so Jonah's saying that there's a second super chat. Okay, gotcha. So maybe you were the second. Let me see here. Hey, everyone. What's up, Jason? So let's see what's up here. Who else gave a super chat? Oh, cool. Another one. Cool, man. Okay, you should look up Fuji Nuwa image in real time, compass and square in their hands. Yeah, exactly. Allegedly, yep, 3 to 5,000 years old. Polaris, Caduceus twins, also Pantheon Circumpunct from the aerial view. Yes, exactly. I'm familiar. And so 100%. Yeah, you got it, man. Jonah, you're totally spot on with all of this stuff. So that's why it's interesting. Once you actually come across, once you can wrap your head around it and you know the symbolism, you just see that it's everywhere. It's all over the place. And that's kind of where I'm at right now, where I'm just like, it like blows my mind when I'm just like decoding random things, how much of it relates to polar symbolism and all of this stuff. But yeah, absolutely. So if you guys have not seen what he's referring to here, check it out because it is absolutely related. I should totally get into that one of these days. So thank you. I didn't check the chat the whole entire time. So I hadn't seen any of these comments. Got it. Right on, right on. Cool. Awesome, dudes. You guys are great. And he sent a third one so that I could see the other super chat. Dude, thank you, man. This is so rad. I'm really glad I finally got to the point where I can actually accept them. So that was kind of one of my goals. And last week I got accepted into that program, which is awesome. So yeah. Thank you. I think I read everything that you put out there. So let me see if there's anything else. What's up, Grants? All right, so just combing through things here. Yep. Okay, cool. Awesome. You guys are so much you guys are just awesome. I mean, seriously, there is I say this like every single time I'm on a stream or whatever, but there are some legit brilliant people here. And so it doesn't go unnoticed. And yeah, I just have a lot of gratitude for you all. I think that's gonna do it, guys. Yeah, I'm sure I'll be around next weekend sometime. My original goal was to go live on Friday. Yesterday was so busy, decided not to, so I went live today. If I can aim for Friday, but basically give myself the flexibility that if I can't make Friday, then I'll do at least Saturday or Sunday. That's going to be kind of like the setup here: is shoot for Friday, and if it doesn't work out, do Saturday or Sunday. So thank you just for being patient and hanging in there with everything. All right, guys, that's it. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. Excuse me. Enjoy the rest of your weekend, and I'll talk to you soon.